You know, my life has just been modeled on Buddhism. It's been my main guiding principle since I was very young. So I've always tried to follow the Buddhist principles of harmlessness, compassion. Not doing very well, but I do try. So I live as far as I can, completely according to the Buddhist teachings. You know, I wasn't too interested in the theological issues. I really wanted something that I could relate to and work with directly. I looked at all the main religions. I started with Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, bit into Sufi, but that's part of Islam, and then Buddhism as well. You know, the others are obviously very good, but Buddhism seemed to have the most comprehensive meditation method, and it suited, I think, my mentality, and I think probably the mentality of a lot of Westerners better, because it's completely pragmatic and exploratory. You don't have to believe things and then just do it. You actually test everything as you go. You know, all my spare time virtually has been spent going on retreats. You know, I've really lived like the life of a monk or a hermit almost. It's getting more like a hermit now. Yeah. I was a monk for the 4 years I was in retreat, but that's the only time I've been a monk. I moved away from my academic life, which was criminology and law, because I wanted to spend all my time with my spiritual practice. Yes. I really loved life at university and teaching students and so on, but it had come to an end, and I realized that, so I left. Let go of any sense of having to do anything. There's nothing to achieve. You don't have to strive. So I started getting teachings from all the Kagyu Lamas. Then I met the 16th Karmapa and His Eminence Taisi Tupa. Akong Rinpoche was my guru. Met Lama Yeshe. And I found that's where I fitted. So it wasn't as though I looked at all the traditions and said, this is the one I want. Because in 1964 I went to Dharamsala in Cloud Ganj. And I met the Dalai Lama then. And I had a whole hour's audience with him. So my first connection was with the Dalai Lama. Then I started going to Samyeling because I was at Edinburgh University, and Samyeling was the nearest. And that's when I met Akong Rinpoche. That's my connection with Tibetan Buddhism started. The ultimate bottom line is you have to do it. It's a DIY religion. It's DIY. You do it. Nobody does it for you. You make the effort. You get your bottom down onto a meditation cushion. You meditate. And you systematically and steadily go deeper and deeper into your own inner experience. Africa is my place of origin. And I'm Akong Rinpoche's representative in Africa. So he was the first Tibetan Lama ever to set foot in Africa. So I have a strong connection. There are three legs of the Rockwood Trust. One is Dharma, which is my main involvement, but because I'm the Lama's representative, I have to be involved with them all. So Dharma is the one, then the whole charity is the second leg, and the third leg is therapy. Mariko is one of Akong Rinpoche's projects. It's a farm we've bought. It's in one of the poorest areas of the Northwest Province. A lot of very poor, unemployed, starving people. We will be establishing a centre there which will focus on healthcare and various forms of charity. We want to do an AIDS advisory service, helping people deal with the AIDS problem. Pippa Cope is actually living there, so she's starting to network and create contacts with local people.
Ja, vir die kerk, maar ons moet ook klere na daar bo gee in 'n ander tyd, hè? Anyway, maar vandag is dit al vir die mense van die kerk, hè?
Ja.
So Maria, kan jy my 'n bietjie help met?
Ja, ek sal jou help.
Goed, dankie. I'm professionally an occupational therapist and a social worker, and I've done development studies. When I'm a bit more settled and a bit more mobile, I want to meet all the people involved with this area, the local farmers who have their own agendas, the farm workers who are all tied to the farmers who don't have much independence, the squatters at the end of the road who are very vulnerable.
We began to discover things like enormous incidents of child abuse. For example, some of the little 6- and 7-year-olds are being treated for syphilis. So there's massive work to be done, helping. It's a very, very disorganized and disrupted community. So we want to see what we can do there. And, you know, as usual, personnel, finance are short, but within whatever limits we have, we will do what we can.
Ja, warm water. The showers.
William is employed here as our caretaker come groundsman. He's a church leader. He's now a non-drinker, which is fairly unusual in this valley. He lives behind us there in that house with his wife and his children. He's considered rich. We pay him the statutory minimum wage in the country now, which is probably double at least what any other people around here get paid. And then you do run into a lot of resentment with neighbouring farmers, so it's walking the tightrope all the time. Mike sal vir jou sê, ons het hierdie keer, mense van Johannesburg het die klere hier vir julle gebring, maar in ander tyd sal ons nie so doen nie, hè? Yes, I think the clothes are going to cause a big problem, and I'm not sure what we're doing today is right, because the church people are going to get it and nobody else in the valley. Want vele mense het so klere en alles so klere en julle het nie geen klere hier. So miskien sal ons 'n klein winkel maak en die klere betaal, you know, sell. Ek weet nie, maar ons moet met julle werk. So
ons sê so ons die Palestynse was baie bly met die eerste keer ons sien die dit mense hulle maak so hulle help vir ons.
I think charity is wonderful. To be able to give food to hungry people is a very, very important thing. When you're starving, it's wonderful to get food, and when you've got no clothes, you obviously need clothes. But I think long term, if people can get sufficient resources to create their own food and to buy their own clothes, long term that is more beneficial to them. They do have money to buy beer, so if we could just try and persuade people maybe to not buy the last extra bottle of beer and buy a few clothes for their family, that's much better use of money. Rinpoche has called this, he's named it Tara Rockpa Healthcare Centre. And when he visited here, he said that this will be a healing place, healing in many ways. healing of the environment, healing of people. And he doesn't want it to be particularly heavily Buddhist. He wants it to be healing for everybody.
So there are two things. What happened in your mind when you realized you were distracted, you were thinking, and then how did you return to meditation support? What did you find out?
I started using the squirrel as a meditation support, but then my mind went into this whole commentary about it. But I was aware that I was thinking.
Good. So the training in meditation is not about not having thought. It's about not engaging and getting involved with the thought. So you start your session and you sit there, and then the squirrel goes, carries on and on and on and on. So you think, oh, I'm not going to use breath as my support, I'll use sound.
I'm a medical anthropologist, and here in Southern Africa I'm working on social and cultural dimensions of HIV/AIDS. And recently life was particularly hectic professionally, and I could see myself just getting very wound up and in a bad mood and tense and reacting, overreacting to things. So that's a time when even just my normal daily meditation isn't enough, and I need something a little deeper and more profound.
When we are sitting meditation, the meditation support is sound or breath. When we walk, the meditation support is physical sensation. And particularly, we focus on the physical sensation in the feet. So you stand there like this, and just get the sense of standing. Then you start walking, and you walk at a sort of gentle pace, just following. You mean most people are whites? Yeah, it is. In this country it's difficult. We've tried a lot of outreach to the black people, but I think the way we study and practice Buddhism isn't the way the blacks like to. Yeah, so I think the blacks have a very different way of relating to religion. It's got to have much more activity, singing, dancing, more involvement with any form of movement and interaction. It's easier to have time to meditate if you're a nun or a monk, because your needs are met. And I suppose that's why it's more difficult for a lay person to be a practitioner, but particularly in the first world countries where you've got such enormous wealth, people can gain access to enough wealth to keep them going through a period like that. It's much more difficult here because in Africa, if you don't work, you don't eat. There's no social security system that will look after you. This is why our main activity among the black people at the moment is charity, meeting their immediate need, which is just to eat once or twice a week. It's difficult to understand that there are people here who might only eat when we take food to them, or one of the other charity organizations. Otherwise, they don't eat. So their level of suffering is quite extreme.
I'm suffering. Since I was coming here last year. No job, nothing. I'm suffering. I'm suffering. Well, that's why we're drinking every day. No place. No. We're sleeping on the street. No place, nothing. That's why we're drinking everything. We're smoking ganja. We're smoking a glue. Problems.
Can I just ask, mixed coffee, and you haven't got the extra spend bench for tomorrow?
I work in a small team. At the moment I'm working with a man called Singer, who's supervisor. He prepares all the food, and then we go together out on the streets.
No, they donate food to us. We buy 80 loaves of bread. We sometimes give clothes if we do have some here. Some people come and donate some clothes for us. They need some blankets. No, I'm not a Buddhist. I'm a Christian from the 12th Apostolic Church of Christ. But the laws of the Buddhism are not similar to ours. The way they do and the way they pray is quite different. Yeah, I think it's the same God, but the way of worshipping is different, but it's the same God.
We meet with them 3 times a week. We go in the evening and provide food and basic medical care and generally just making contact and trying to uplift them in some way. Particularly now this winter, we give cough mixture, cold flu tablets, vitamin tablets. Then we do first aid, of course. On the streets, it's a hard life. People struggle to make ends meet, and people get stabbed, people get beaten up, and so they come to you and they sometimes need stitches, or sometimes they need to go to hospital, really.
Who are you?
Can I see you?
They're very well known now, of course, because we've been going a long time. The inner city of Johannesburg is probably the most dangerous place you can go nowadays. There's a lot of crime, but they've made friends with so many people there and become so accepted as part of that community that they actually feel quite safe now.
Yeah.
Of course, the people they go to still steal from them. It's very funny. One winter, we found that the soup was getting cold by the time we got to the last stop because we didn't have a proper thermos. So we went to one of the big corporations and said, would they give us a few £1,000 to buy a beautiful big thermos? You know, it was a big pot that held about, I don't know, 100 litres of soup. And we were very overjoyed. We had this beautiful pot, and we went out and distributed soup out of it, and it's all done from the back of a van. And one day they came back and the pot had been stolen. So all the things we take, if they're not carefully watched, get stolen. And anybody who comes gets fed. You know, sometimes you get quite well-off people on the way home. They just stop in and have some soup. They're not impoverished, but Akron Rinpoche said, whoever comes, feed them, you know, give them. There's no discrimination. We don't say, you can't have soup because you're rich. It's just there for everybody. And by the way, you know, we never tell them that Rockpur is Buddhist. So there's no possible suggestion that you only get fed if you become a Buddhist. It's just Rockpur is here to help you. But it's taking much longer in South Africa. I think maybe because of the apartheid, you know, the overspill from apartheid, where things were so rigidly separated that when I first started giving lectures in Cape Town, black people came, but they were committing a crime. You know, it was a crime for a black person to attend a white person's lecture. So the blacks would come, but it was always very awkward, and then the secret police used to come. So I'd give a lecture, and I'd walk in, and I'd immediately recognize these two secret police guys because they'd all be dressed in suits, and they'd be looking very uncomfortable and stiff, and they'd be watching everybody. And when visiting lecturers came, I used to warn them. I'd say, now listen, those two are the secret police, so be careful what you say. You know, that's how we had to be in those days. So I think it's going to take time to get through that. Most of the things we do when we start thinking disturb the mind. Have you noticed that? If you think of the ocean, there's no wind, the ocean becomes very still, doesn't it? The nature of the mind is to be tranquil, but the way we experience it due to our conditioning is the opposite. So it's like water. The nature of water is to be tranquil. But if it's constantly disturbed by wind or some other external force, it's always in movement and it's always choppy and disturbed. So I use that image when I'm talking about meditation so that people can understand that if they practice mindfulness, they free the mind from the influences that cause disturbance, and then the mind will settle of its own accord. You do not have to calm it down. You don't have to kind of pat it and make it go quiet. It will go quiet when you remove the causes of disturbance. So we see that when we get caught in thinking cycles, we pick up emotion, and then the storm starts, and it gathers momentum, and before you know it, you're sitting in a beautiful, peaceful, serene environment, having an absolute tantrum all to yourself. All by yourself. Completely self-generated. And we have many, many ways of doing that. We can rerun the past, or we can think about the future, get all stirred up about the future, or we can analyze the hell out of ourselves, and then before you know it, your mind's whirling, isn't it? Do your minds work like that? Or is it just me? I encountered all my neuroses. It was a very difficult time early years. I think we all have psychological problems, but they didn't cripple me. I wasn't in therapy. I didn't have to have drugs or anything like that. But I was very neurotic, and I probably still am. But that's fine. It's quite okay to be neurotic. And Akong Rinpoche has devised his own form of therapy based on principles of Buddhist understanding. The base of that therapy is accessing buried psychological memories, very like psychoanalysis, but not using psychoanalytic method. Right at the beginning, when they start with their therapy, they're beginning to get training that's going to help them to recognize that involvement with egocentric thinking creates the problem.
The idea of the therapy is certainly not to discuss our lives and try and work through anybody's issues, although they sometimes come up, but that is incidental. Well, everybody in the group is a member and a facilitator, so we take turns in leading the sessions. We had over 6 months of just learning how to relax and going through the massages and visualizations.
The following exercise, relaxation, visualization, was given by Venerable Akong Rinpoche.
And the integration starts with accepting, coming to terms with, allowing the fact that negative and conflicting emotions are present in the mind, and recognizing they're not bad, they're not terrible, they won't destroy us, they're okay, we can let them be, and slowly, by allowing that and letting them come up and be integrated, whatever underlying issues are causing them start revealing themselves, and then people are able to free their minds.
Yeah, it's a very clear process. The whole idea came from Akon Rinpoche, starting off with the relaxation. And I know that what he discovered when he came to the West was that in people trying to meditate, they were really struggling because they couldn't relax. So I think he set it up initially as learning how to relax.
Although there are psychological issues involved, the focus on compassion, caring for others, and freeing oneself from egocentric grasping create a dimension which is beyond the therapy dimension, so that there's less chance of people getting fixated in the issues and problems of just therapy, which are purely related to personality, and then enabling people to go beyond, so that it carries them through in a much more complete way into their spiritual practice. You tend to get the situation in somewhere like Europe and America, where there are trends. You know, it's trendy to be Buddhist. Well, there's nothing of that in Africa. It is not trendy to be a Buddhist, I tell you. Quite the opposite. We get a lot of flack from churches, particularly the fundamentalist churches, preaching against us and sending out secret messages saying, you know, Buddhism is the act of the devil and all that sort of thing. So it's very much a marginal activity in Africa to be a Buddhist. So I think we can easily make the mistaken assumption that Buddhism only works in the upper socioeconomic stratum of society. But that's not true. And we can see that from Tibet and from places like China and India, where very poor people are Buddhist. And Akon Rinpoche has predicted that Buddhism will spread like wildfire when the Africans begin to connect with and understand it, because they are directly in touch with their suffering. Therefore, they will realize that Buddhism helps them, and I think this is a key thing. When people really realize suffering, then they understand Buddhism can help us. And you don't need to be rich or poor to realize that. And the poor people are actually in a better position because they're in touch with their suffering at a physical level all the time.